Ready? Play.
Welcome back to another episode of Painting Lines. Last week, we broke down the first week of the Australian Open, and this week, we're going to be recapping the last few rounds of the tournament. I thought the final was a bit underwhelming, but I can honestly say I'm not surprised. What about you, Aiden? Did you expect anything more out of Zverev, or were you thinking straight sets for Sinner?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I mentioned to you after the match, I think this match kind of reminded me of Zverev when he played Dimitrov in Miami last year, where his entire game was so dependent on how his serve was going. And even with that, he still had chances to take the momentum and just couldn't. And based on how Sinner had played in the semis, I don't know if I would say that I was shocked by how this went because Shelton and Zverev to me are honestly relatively similar. Big serve, decent baseline game. Obviously, Zverev is a step up above Shelton, but either way, I don't think either one is really on the same level as Sinner. But I do think if Zverev had been able to push it further than it being straight sets, I think it would have kind of shifted the momentum because it felt like, especially after he lost that tiebreak in the second set, he just had nothing. Like that third set felt like already decided before you even started it. And I think if he had been able to build any sort of momentum, he just he couldn't. And if he'd been able to, it would have changed the tone of the match.
Yeah, definitely. Just going off that, even in his speech after his press conference, he basically said that after that second set, the match is a lot different when you're down two sets versus being tied at 1-1. Because someone asked him, like, did you think you were going to lose the match towards the end? Like, what could you do? And he's like, I mean, I'm not going to lie, being down two sets and being, down a break in the third is you pretty much accept it at that point. But I kind of thought I would see at least more than three sets because of how well rested he was going into the tournament and how, maybe fatigued or there was some kind of the talk of the illness that Sinner may have had. So I thought because of like physical attributes, maybe that there it could have been a longer match.
Yeah, no, I think that kind of played into why it ended up actually being three sets. Uh, on the other side, because I think Sinner pushed probably a little harder in those first three sets because he wasn't really okay with it going longer. We know that he had had illness early in the tournament. Even in this match, I know at one point he like grabbed his leg a little bit and it looked like maybe he was cramping or dealing with some sort of hamstring issue. And so you wonder if maybe Sinner was like, I have to finish this in three sets because if this goes to four, goes to five, the momentum might shift towards Zverev.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how he and Alcaraz are complete opposites in that aspect because as the match goes on, you start to favor Alcaraz more, whereas Sinner, I think, is the complete opposite.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that Sinner is better when he can get it done quickly. And because of his history of having cramps, having illnesses, you know how good he is in three sets and being able to just dominate his opponents. As it goes on, he's just more likely to have some sort of physical issue that starts to play a role.
Yeah, I know. But overall, what did you think of the tournament? Like, what are your thoughts?
Honestly, I think through the first few rounds, it was exciting because we saw so many kind of surprising upsets. We saw the next gen guys doing really well. We saw an interesting match where someone like Medvedev goes out to Lerner Tien. That's something you don't see every day. And then you see some runs from guys like Sonego making it deep. That's interesting to me. And then you get to the semis and the finals, and it kind of became a lot less interesting, to be honest. You look at what happened in those last three matches of the tournament, which are supposed to kind of be like the premier matchups of the tournament, and didn't really deliver like we were hoping it. I mean, we saw Zverev and Djokovic was one set. We see Sinner clobber Shelton, and then Sinner beats the brakes off Zverev, kind of. And it's just not what you're hoping for when you're going to those matches, when you're watching those matches in the semis and the finals.
I 100% agree. And the stars even aligned too. You had the one seed play the two seed in the final. Like that's how it should be. But I think a healthy Djokovic or an Alcaraz would have been a much better final or a much better competitive match versus Sinner.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to the fact that Djokovic and Alcaraz have won slams. Just having that mental of I've done this before, I've performed in these moments before, plays such a massive role going into this match, whereas Zverev feels so much pressure. Like, oh my God, I'm in another final, but I've never won one before. I'm going up against the best guy in the world. You kind of go in, it seems like, with a lot more, pressure against you.
And I feel like because there is kind of that lack of excitement throughout the tournament that I was excited for this final. Like I am on Eastern Standard Time and I woke up at 3:30 for it because the aspect of this could possibly be Zverev's first Grand Slam that he wins. And, I was kind of rooting for it. But then as the match went on, I just kind of lost all faith and I was getting tired. And at that point, I just wanted three sets. I
Yeah.
wanted to go back to sleep.
That second set, though, that really felt like it could have gone to Zverev. It felt as though he had a lot of chances there and it just couldn't get it done.
Yeah, I saw a clip on X of a Nadal Federer Australian Open final point, and the caption said something like, this is how Grand Slam finals used to look. And it just felt very nostalgic because people are so used to that being a Grand Slam final, not Sinner beating the pants off of Zverev or a final going three sets. So I think I was underwhelmed by the tournament. I think the final kind of left a bad taste in my mouth as like not being as memorable as other ones.
Yeah, well, I
Not
mean,
like a Djokovic Alcaraz Wimbledon final.
100%. But I mean, that was one for the ages, that 2023 final. I mean,
Hmm.
there's that 2017 Australian Open final I still remember watching, and that was Federer Nadal, maybe one of the best matches of all time. So there are matches like that that you get, and then you have ones like this where, I mean, you look at this one, you look at when Djokovic played Medvedev in last 2 years ago, 2023 U.S. Open final. Like it was just straight sets. It never really felt as though Medvedev had the upper hand in that match. And while he didn't, like I said, he got the breaks beat off him. That's not really accurate. It was relatively close. He didn't beat him 6-1, 6-1, 6-1, but it didn't feel as though Zverev had that confidence that you get from, like I said earlier, winning a slam final. And he's probably not going to get it unless he gets a great lucky opportunity to win one.
Yeah, most definitely. So let's jump into the quarters here. Let's take a step back. We had Zverev and Tommy Paul as our first match. This one was a tough match for Tommy because he had the opportunity to serve out the first two sets, couldn't get it done, and he actually won the third set, but then lost pretty badly in the fourth, 6-1. This was pretty unfortunate for him.
100%. I mean, he just couldn't hold on to his advantages in this match. And it felt as though his game just failed him in critical moments. The fact that he was serving for both of the first two sets and didn't win either of those games just isn't a good sign because we know that if his serve is at least decent, he's very favored to win when he's on serve. And he just choked there, to be honest. He lost confidence in part of his game that should be very strong. And another aspect is that he also had set points in both of those sets. I think one of them was on his serve and the other one was a break set point. But either way, he had pressure points where he had the chance to at least either go up in the first set or to even it up in that second set. Couldn't deliver in those moments and ends up going down 2 sets to love. And when you've been so close twice, that's going to play a mental toll. Even though he won that set, it's going to be tough for him to win three in a row.
Yeah, you can kind of exactly. It's kind of hard to say like, oh, if he had won those first two sets, he would have won in straight sets, but you never know how a match is going to play out.
Yeah.
How about that next one, Shelton Sonego? This to you is the most interesting quarterfinal matchup, right?
Yeah, definitely the most interesting matchup where we had two guys that were surprising to see there. I mean, I know Shelton had only played one top 20 guy in Musetti, and Sonego had played zero top 20 guys, hadn't even played a ranked opponent or a seeded opponent, rather, until he played Shelton here. And in the end, they kind of played like their ranking suggested, which was very tight, very kind of scared in this moment, which is understandable. I mean, for both of them, it's a very big match. Whereas for someone like a Sinner, it's a lot less stressful. But it just felt as though both guys just didn't play at the level they could play pretty much.
Mhm.
From Shelton, it felt like he was playing very cautious and just trusting that his game was stronger than Sonego's, which it kind of was. And Sonego was forced to be a little bit more aggressive. And the interesting thing was that it was working for Sonego if he had been able to put away some of the easy shots that he set up. For example, Sonego might come to the net and then he would just miss a volley, or he would just miss a forehand badly from the baseline. And you're just looking at him like, dude, you can do this 99 out of 100 times, but you're just letting the pressure get to you. And we're all in the armchair, I guess, tennis players, right? Where it's not easy to be in that moment, but for someone that is a professional, you're kind of disappointed for them.
Yeah, and for all those, kind of errors that he made, I feel like he also had some good plays too. Like remember that volley where he pulled the Benoit and pair where he kind of dove backhand and volley and then the ball bounced on Shelton's side and then back over. That was exciting. And then he had an opportunity where he was lobbed and he was sprinting back for it. And instead of ripping a tweener, which was kind of the most predictable move, he hit the ball at shoulder height, just kind of slapped it next to him, which I thought was sweet because that just ripped down the line.
Yeah, I mean, like he had moments, but it
Hmm.
just was that I think he honestly made the harder plays some of the time and then screwed up the easy ones.
Yeah, to me, this was a match where it felt like Shelton just played a little bit better than Sonigo. Like he wasn't dominating him by any means. He just kind of did marginally better. Like he had a few more winners, made a few less errors. Um, had a one or two more breakpoint conversions, but ultimately like nothing crazy.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, not to sound like a cup half full kind of guy,
Hmm.
I almost feel as though it was less Shelton playing a little bit better and more just Sonego playing a little bit worse. Neither
Is that
guy
not the same
played
thing though?
well. It is. I just wouldn't say either guy played good. I
Hmm.
think they both kind of played bad, and then
Yeah,
Sonego played worse.
yeah. Shelton's been there. He's been at that caliber, but I could see why Sonigo kind of maybe let the nerves get to him.
Yeah,
But
and on Shelton's side too, I think sometimes Shelton probably played actually better against Sinner in his next match
mhm.
because he has way less pressure. Shelton's expected to beat Sonego. Shelton
Yeah, that's
probably
a
expect to beat Sonego pretty badly,
that's a
but
good point.
when he's playing Sinner, he's has zero expectation. People aren't expecting him to win at all, and he can go out there and play a lot more free.
Yeah, totally. All right, let's get into Djokovic Alcaraz. So obviously Djokovic won this one. It was a pretty tight four setter. I would say like the score didn't necessarily reflect it, but a lot of the games were tight. To me, this was probably the match of the tournament. A little hint, hint for later on. But this is where we had the Djokovic injury. So he drops the first set, takes this injury timeout. You thought the match was over, right? You're like,
Yeah,
all
I
right,
like
this is
stopped
done.
watching for like I think maybe like part of the that next set because I was like, okay, he's lost the first set, he's injured, this is just done.
Yeah, gets the physio out there, takes a long medical timeout. I think takes some kind of meds, some kind of pain relievers, and then wins the next three. And not only did he win, but he was so dominant. I've never seen Alcaraz that frustrated in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I think Djokovic just came out and was very aggressive with Alcaraz, and I think that showed in the statistics. Djokovic hit 19 more winners, but also had 13 more unforced errors. So when you look at that, the way I like to look at something like those numbers, Djokovic ended the point 32 more times than Alcaraz did. So 32 times Alcaraz didn't get a chance to hit the ball. And in Djokovic's camp, that was a +6 because six more of those times he won the point than he lost the point, which I think in the end is kind of a positive, right? He's going out there, he's playing aggressive, and he's taking the game to Alcaraz rather than trying to let it come to him, which is something you kind of see a decent amount, I feel like, with Djokovic when he's very comfortable, is he lets the game come to him and he just goes, okay, yeah, beat me. But against Alcaraz, you're like, okay, this guy can beat you if you just let him play his game. So Djokovic instead put Alcaraz on his heels.
Yeah, exactly. He basically asserted his will on him. And that's a veteran move because he knew that he couldn't last physically with him because he, first of all, he's injured. Second of all, he's getting up there in age and Alcaraz is fresh. He's pretty much in his prime. So he had no choice but to end these points early. And it
Yeah.
paid off for him. The gamble worked.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of what you want to see from Medvedev against Sinner, right?
Hmm.
Medvedev is so well known for letting the game come to him because he trusts his ground strokes so much. But he, to win at this point, he has to start taking the game to his opponent.
Yeah, I've heard people talk about playing Djokovic. Out of all the big three, like Djokovic is the hardest because he'll suck you in. Like his shots aren't anything crazy. Like, oh, this is like a pussy ass rally ball that I can hang with. But he's just sucking you in. He's baiting you. And then next thing you know, you're on your heels and he's like just all over it. So I
Yeah.
think you got to bring it to him when you play someone like that. And
He's
Sinner
so good
too.
at
Yeah.
controlling the pace of his
Hmm.
shots.
Definitely. All right, let's get into Sinner Deminar. There's really not much to say here. Deminar just got completely rolled. All in all, I thought a pretty good run for him, though.
Yeah. I mean, it does kind of feel as though Deminar is at a plateau where if he wants to compete with the top three guys, you look at Alcaraz, Sinner, even Zverev, he's got to do something different than what he does because he can beat a lot of guys. Pretty much anyone outside the top 10, he has a very good chance of beating. But then if you look at guys in the top 10 and in the top three specifically, you go in, you're like, okay, not feeling super confident for him.
Hmm. Yeah, didn't you bring up the stat a couple weeks ago that he breaks so much? Like he breaks serve a lot.
Yeah, I think he was like the best like return guy last year, but he wasn't like his serve just isn't at the same level as these other top
Yeah, he
guys.
just needs more weapons, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, you look at the best servers in the game. Yes, you have guys that kind of stand out, like Impeshi Pericard, who isn't necessarily a top guy, but his serve is really good. But then if you look at the rest of like the top 10, realistically, these are all guys that are in the top 15. Sinners, Zverev, guys like that have super powerful serves. So their service games are pretty much guaranteed for them. And they're just trying to break their opponent one time, maybe.
mhm. So let me ask you this: do you kind of group Deminar in that generation of like Rublev, Zverev, Tsitsipas, Rude guys, Medvedev, who are kind of like on their way out?
I don't know. I feel like the thing with Deminar is that he he hasn't really shown that competing for a slam level yet. So it you talk about a lot of these guys. I mean, not necessarily Rublev, but you look at Tsitsipas, Rude, Medvedev, even Zverev here. These guys are competing for slam titles. They have competed for slam titles,
Hmm.
and they've been threats to win slam titles. Deminar, Rublev haven't really been like thought of as, oh, this guy's next up. He's going to win a slam. And so I don't know if I'd group them in the same category.
Got it. Got it. All right. How about the semis now? So our first matchup was Sinner Shelton. I thought Shelton put up a pretty good fight in the first set. You know, it was competitive, forced it to a breaker, but then Sinner just took care of business next two sets, winning 6-2, 6-2.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was never super worried for Sinner here. It felt as though as long as he kept his composure, he would be fine in this match. And that's how it ended up. He stayed calm, won the breaker, and then Shelton just had no chance in those next couple sets.
Yeah, but all in all, good run for Shelton. You know, he like, continues to do well in slams, you know, follows it up.
I mean, I think the big thing for Shelton here was not essentially falling under the lack of pressure. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Where it isn't like he made a crazy run. He didn't beat a bunch of top guys, but he didn't also, like I was saying, when he was playing Sonigo, the pressure is not, oh, can you beat this top guy? It's, oh, are you going to play like a top 20 guy when you're playing someone that's probably below your level? And
Hmm.
he did that. He beat guys he was expected to beat, and that got him all the way to a Grand Slam semifinal, which I think is a great job.
Yeah, great start to the year, made some good money, and let's hope he can like keep this momentum going for the rest.
100%.
All right, next up, probably the most anticlimactic match, Zverev Djokovic. So we had a very tight first set, went to a tiebreaker, and then at the end of it, out of nowhere, Djokovic retires. He just went across, shook Zverev's hand, and left. Didn't even try to get the physio out there. He pretty much knew. And then probably one of the most controversial events of the whole tournament happened where he got booed on his way out. Like, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly feel like Djokovic went into this match injured probably, and he was like,
Hmm.
maximum I can play 3 sets, and he at least wanted to try to play because we've had situations in the past where a guy goes out there, wins a match in maybe the quarterfinals, and then doesn't play in a semi. Think about
What?
Nadal at Wimbledon a couple years ago, where he kind of gifted Kyrgios that final slot, or
Hmm.
Djokovic in the French Open last year won the round of 16. I think gave Rude a route straight from the quarters to this, like he got a walkover in the quarters or something like that. So you look at these situations where yes, it was a bummer, but it's better. Is it better that he at least tried to go out there and play rather than just not playing at all? It also was a weird thing because it was a tough first set. I think it was an 80-minute first set, which
Hmm.
in some matches could be 2 sets, to be honest. And it did end in a pretty like bad way for Djokovic. Just at the net, dumps an easy volley into the bottom of the net, and then he's like, "I'm just done." In terms of the booing, I kind of understand the in the moment. It's one of those things where the crowd probably 5 minutes later was thinking, "Oh, we shouldn't have booed," right?
Hmm.
But in the moment, they're like, "Oh, come on, man, we want to see you keep playing," and they were just immediate reaction was, "Oh, I can't believe this," and then later they're like, "Oh, we probably shouldn't have done that because we were glad we saw him play anyway."
Yeah, I think the Australian Open crowd is pretty similar to the US Open crowd, where a lot of people tend to be rowdy. There's a lot of drinking going on. And I feel like because Djokovic was kind of public enemy number one in Australia a few years ago, like people already have this disdain towards him. So I think it was just a initial reaction, like you said. Like the GOAT should never be booed off the court. But in defense of them, like by no means am I on the crowd side here, but I can see I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. Like he didn't even try. He didn't even get the physio out there. I feel like maybe that was just a little too abrupt, like they paid good money for their seats, and I think they at least wanted him to see him try.
Yeah,
Like try
no,
to
my thing is, feel like I said, that he probably had this pre-planned.
hmm.
He was saying, "I'm injured going into the match, and if it goes over a certain amount of time, I cannot keep playing." And the first set was just, I know that I can't do it. Would it have been better for the crowd if he'd gotten the physio out there, played like one more game, and then retired?
I mean, at least it shows to them like, hey, I tried. I tried to play,
I mean,
not
think
just
about
like
Dimitrov
screw it.
in the U.S. Open last year when he played Tiafo. Those
Hmm.
last 6 games he played
Hmm.
were pathetic, really. I mean, he was just completely immobile. His legs were gone, and I just felt like retire, dude. There's no real
Yeah.
point of you being out there and risking another further injury than like instead of just retiring, being having the match be over, especially when he retired in the end.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I want to touch on something you said earlier. So you said that first set was 80 minutes. I remember hearing that stat and just thinking, wow, Sinner took care of Deminar in a whole match in an hour 42 minutes. And then this first set was 80 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
If Zverev had beaten the brakes off of Djokovic, he probably would have played the full match.
Yeah, that's funny. All
Yeah.
right. Let's see. Final time. Sinner's Zverev. We touched on this before, but basically Sinner took care of business. He didn't face a single break point
Which
in this
is
whole match.
an insane stat. The only 4 guys to have won a slam without facing a break point are obviously Sinner here. We had Nadal against Kevin Anderson in the 2017 US Open, Federer versus Philippoussis in the 2003 Wimbledon, and then Sampras versus Becker in the 1995 Wimbledon. So that's a pretty elite group of guys to be with. But I think what's kind of funny is you look at those matchups, 2 of them are like kind of a top guy against a shocker. Philippoussis and Anderson aren't necessarily the top opponents, but you look at Becker and Zverev, it's kind of shocking to see that they weren't able to force a break. I guess Becker does get a sort of exemption because he did actually win the first set in that match. He just didn't break Sampras's serve. But realistically, Zverev, you would have expected him to at least force a break point in this match. And the fact that he didn't is just crazy.
I was gonna say Zverev he's a pretty good returner too. It's not like he's a slouch on there who just serves. But I actually saw a pretty interesting article where they were talking to Monfils and they were asking him about his win against GMP. And they kind of asked him like, how do you approach playing against a massive server? And Monfils, being the veteran guy that he is, was basically saying like, it's not about the return game, it's how you can limit break points on your side. Like since you know that they're going to be a great server, you have to do your part to not face a break point, to hold your serve. And I think that's what Sinner did here. Like he started serving so well instead of having to deal with, all right, let me try to tweak any returns to Zverev. He just focused on holding his own serve.
Yeah, I think that that's a good way of looking at it because you're like, I'm expected to lose
Hmm.
the return game. To be honest, just relating to my own experience, I played goalie for a long time in soccer. And when you go into a penalty kick, people are like, oh, you must feel so much pressure. But realistically, for the goalie, there's no pressure because you're not expected to save the penalty. So you kind of feel free out there. And that's got to be how it feels when you're going against a guy hitting a serve at 150 miles an hour consistently.
Hmm.
You're like, I'm not expected to win this return game. But then all of a sudden you put a couple good returns together, you're leading maybe 15-30 in this game. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, I have a chance here. And then you lock in on that return game. But when you go down in the first 3 points immediately and lose them and you're down 40 love, you're like, okay, this isn't super pressurized for me.
Yeah, and we talked about Zverev kind of looking flat out there, looking unmotivated. And think about this. The first set, he went out and served like 80% first serves and averaged 130 miles an hour and still lost the first set. Like, no wonder he looked unmotivated out there. And it was funny because on the broadcast, Johnny Mack was calling. And I feel like at this point, he doesn't even do like real tennis analysis. He just kind of speaks out of his ass and was
Just
just
gives the
having a
vibes of the match.
exactly, literally just the vibes. And he was having a field day with it. Like every time, for example, at the end of the match, they were bringing out the trophy in the hallway before the match was even over, and they're like, maybe that'll motivate him. Maybe seeing that, and then he'd be like, yeah, everyone in the camera crew standing up, ready to go. Maybe that'll motivate him. Just kind of throwing in backhand
You know,
jabs.
it's like when you see at a US Open match, like all the kids running down to like the
Oh.
court side, and you're like, dude, the match isn't over yet. You guys realize this?
Yeah, yeah. They started bringing out the trophy I think as Sinner was like before he was going to serve out the match. So when it was call it like 4-2 or something.
Yeah, that's wild.
But dude, let's talk about his press conference and the speech after. This was kind of sad to see because the main theme here was Zverev just basically saying, I'm not good enough. Like something that I thought was pretty interesting was he said there are five main components to a tennis. You have forehand, backhand, you have serving, you have volleying, and then you have movement. He said Sinner does four out of the five things better than he does. Really, the only thing he has over Sinner is serve. And he's like, he's just better than me. Like, I am simply not good enough to compete out there.
In the serve bit, like difference is not as big as like it seems really. Like Zverev has a great serve, but
Yeah.
Sinner also has an excellent serve now.
Yeah. And that's something he worked on too. Like, Sinner did not always have a great serve.
Well, I think that's what took him right from being like a very good player to being like consensus best player in the world.
I'm on, speaking of that, you know how Cahill, this was his last match with Sinner. He's retiring. How much of that do you think is him? Like, do you think Sinner's going to continue this dominance without his coach? Because Cahill's the one who kind of brought him up and saw the three Grand Slams with him.
Well, I think he's leaving him in a good spot. I think
Hmm.
Sinner's still the best guy in the world. I think the question is when a shift comes and Sinner has to adapt, how well will he be able to deal with that?
Yeah. Well, speaking of, Sinner adding the serve to become next level, he's also doing it with the drop shot. Like he was hitting the drop shot a lot against Zverev because he identified Zverev loves to kind of hang behind the baseline. And it wasn't like it was a perfect drop shot, but I feel like it just did enough to win the point. Like he didn't necessarily need winners on the drop shot, but he was able to bring Zverev in and then just rip passing shots.
I think that also goes to like what McEnroe was talking about in the broadcast, which was that Zverev's volleying was not that great. Zverev had a lot of chances at the net where he could have put the ball away and he just didn't.
Hmm.
And so Sinner could just bring him to the net. He didn't have to finish him with a drop shot. He could just be like, okay, I'm going to give you a drop shot where you don't just crush it. You get to the ball and you're putting in like a 50-50 situation, and I'm just going to hit the ball at you. Either I'm going to pass you or I'm just going to hit the ball at you. And Zverev was just not dealing with those shots very well. And in the end, it worked out very well for Sinner.
Yeah, yeah, and this is just another tool to his arsenal as well. Like we see how well it works for Alcaraz hitting that drop shot. I think Sinner's only just gonna get good at it. But let's talk about his classiness too. Like this was kind of a weird scene, a little bit awkward, where you had a 27, 28-year-old Zverev crying up there on the podium, and then young 23-year-old Sinner like consoling him, basically arms around his shoulder, giving him words of encouragement. He said something like, "We all believe you can lift one of these very soon." Like it's sad to think about, you know?
Yeah, and I to be honest, it hearing that from the winner is kind of like not great. Like, yeah, great. I'm glad you believe in me, but you also just beat me in straight sets. So, do you really believe that? It's
Yeah.
it's tough to see Zverev winning a title like this if he has to play someone like Alcaraz or Sinner. I mean, he had a great match with Alcaraz at the French Open last year, but didn't win it. And then Sinner was here was even worse.
Yeah, I feel like you see that a lot in UFC too, like the mutual respect for your opponent, right? Like you could just choke someone out and then after you're like helping them up and bowing to them.
Yeah, it's like, oh, great job. It's like, dude, you just literally knocked me out. I did clearly didn't do a great job.
Oh, yeah.
But either way, I feel like the last thing, just one more comment about this match was just that Zverev, kind of like Tommy Paul in their match earlier, had the chances, necessarily didn't, not necessarily with a break point, but there were a couple times he could have put it away at the net, played it too safe, and it came back to bite him. And I think really that moment at 4-4 in the tiebreak when it tipped off the net and landed on his side was the end of the match. Because after that, Zverev didn't seem like he had any confidence in the tiebreak, and I think lost the next 2 points just very quickly. And if he had gotten that point and then won the breaker, he might have gotten that confidence and then maybe pushed it to a longer match where Sinner, who wasn't necessarily 100% healthy, like we've talked about, could have gone his way. But like you said, it's that whole negative sort of energy he was bringing. And I think this moment just encapsulated the whole thing.
And to close it out, a little food for thought, because I'm sure this is on the top of a lot of people's minds, but is Zverev the best player to never win a slam?
I think he's up there for sure. Like he's definitely in that conversation. The only guys I would think of are like Rios, who was number one in the world at one point, but never ended up winning a slam. And then also maybe Soderling, who had like beat Nadal at the French Open, was the first guy to ever beat him there, uh, and lost to Federer. I
Mm.
think played in another French Open final too, where he lost to Nadal. And those were like prime Nadal years too. So I think you look at guys like that where they were clearly a very high level and didn't win it either. But I think, like you said, Zverev definitely in the conversation. 3 slam finals, no slam victories.
Yeah, I would even argue that Zverev is better than Medvedev, but Medvedev has that one slam at least to his name.
100%. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
big deal. And Medvedev's been number one, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
But all right, just some miscellaneous items that I want to bring up from the tournament. And the first one is the Djokovic Murray coaching relationship. So this was also something that people were wondering if this was kind of more of a trial period or if they were going to actually maintain this relationship. So Djokovic was asked about it in the press conference. He basically said, "Hey, like guys, I don't even know. We haven't discussed this. This event just happened. My injury just happened. We're still processing the loss. So we'll keep in touch. I mean, I don't know if this will last much longer. I feel like Djokovic's career won't last much longer, but what are your thoughts, Aiden? Do you think this will last longer? Just speculating.
well, I mean, realistically, it was a successful tournament, to be honest. I mean, when you look at Djokovic in the past, obviously he's won the tournament so many times. So that comes into play, but made the semis, which is a pretty solid performance, beat Alcaraz in the tournament, which is obviously always a big deal, given the fact that Alcaraz is arguably the best guy in the world. I mean, he beat Sinner 3 times last year, but made the semis and then was just injured and couldn't continue. So you wouldn't say that it was anything about his actual tennis level that let him down here. So whether or not Murray gets any credit for that, I don't know, given the fact that Djokovic has been at this level before. But I think you wouldn't say that Murray had a negative impact in this tournament.
Right. And I think this will just be for maybe big tournaments, slams. So I don't think he'll maintain him the whole year, right?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, right?
We'll see. We'll see. But speaking of Djokovic, he posted a picture on X of an MRI scan of his injury. It turns out it's a torn hamstring. And I feel like he
Jesus.
did, yeah, he did that because there are so many haters. Like he has a reputation for faking injuries, or so like I think he only has that because Federer went out and did that press conference years and years ago where he's like, yeah, he's known to fake injuries. He's done this before. So I feel like there's a negative stigma with Djokovic on faking injuries.
Yeah, the crazy thing to think about is that you're holding Djokovic to a standard of like 18-year-old Djokovic faking an injury when he is now 38. It's like, come on, guys. He's
It's like the boy who
definitely,
cried
yeah,
wolf.
yeah. The boy who cried
You
wolf,
do
but the 38-year-old man, and you're like, nah, we didn't. You lied that one time when
yeah.
you were 14.
Yeah, but it is crazy that he had to post an actual picture of his MRI to be like, for those of you who think I'm faking.
Yeah, and people are like, oh no, that's not him. That's he looked up torn hamstring on the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah, prove it.
Yeah, prove
Yeah,
that
I'm
it's
no,
yours.
I had no idea what I was looking at. I had to like read the comments on it. I'm like, okay, dude, I am not a doctor, but
Yeah, exactly.
here we go. Speaking of social media, Alcaraz posted a congrats to Sinner on his Instagram story. Personally, I'm not a fan of it. I wish these two hated each other and there was more of like a nasty rivalry, not where they're friends. I don't like how they're friends.
Yeah, you want it to be like WWE.
Yeah, give me a storyline.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think that's really realistic. I mean, I think even with Federer and Nadal, like by the end of their career, they were pretty good friends.
Yeah, by the end of their career,
I mean, I don't
there's
even
plenty.
think
Yeah,
I don't think there was ever really that much like enmity between them though.
I
Like,
think there was mutual respect, but I don't think they were like going out of their way to congratulate each other. I don't know. Times
that's
are
no, okay,
different.
that's true. That's true. I don't know if they were going out of their way to maybe like make a post about
Hmm.
the other guy's success, but I don't know if they were ever, like I said, enemies.
Yeah. I guess I'm just used to now Djokovic. I feel like
Yeah,
he's got that killer mentality. Like there's no way he's congratulating an opponent. At least earlier in his career. Now, yes. Now
yeah,
I can see it.
yeah. He still gets angry that every once in a while though. Like when he kind of like went after Nardi after he lost to him in Indian Wells last year. You're like, dude, come on, this guy's like ranked 128th in the
Yeah.
world. What's going on here?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But and then lastly here, we just have like kind of that looming decision on Sinner's fate, whether or not he's going to be banned for 1 to 2 years. And that'll be decided in April. Just so unfortunate that this guy is pretty much peaking in his career, and now it could be just all for not for nothing, but just completely halted because of this BS doping scandal.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I think that would be if he got banned, it would suck. I think obviously, I don't really think Sinner is majorly at fault here. Seems like on all the past stuff from the case, he shouldn't get banned. But if he did get banned for 2 years, it would throw an interesting wrench into the tennis world, right? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
what happens now? Alcaraz is like the consensus. This guy's the best player in the world, but he also might go out early in a tournament, and you're like, okay, what's going to happen now?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it would make it interesting, but I don't know if you necessarily want to see that if the guy isn't actually at fault.
Right. And this is such a polarizing topic too, because you have one camp who is so pissed that Sinner won this slam final because you have he cheated, he's not ethical, like this is why he's doing so well. And someone even posted on Twitter, I saw like tennis is in such a bad state right now. You have a woman beater and a doper in the final playing. It's like,
Yeah.
come on. So just,
I mean, these are both alleged things. Alleged.
yeah,
Did they put alleged in there?
they did not put alleged. They
So
just
that
went
sounds
straight
like
for it.
some libel from that person.
Yeah.
I guess it's
Yeah.
not a published media, so I guess it would just be like slander. But anyway, you ready to hop into segments here?
Yeah, let's do it. Hey guys, before we jump in, we have some exciting news. We recently partnered with TruePro. They're a great place to buy strings, grips, and tennis apparel. Use discount code Painting Lines, that's one word, for 20% off store wide. You can find the link in our bio.
Alrighty. What's new in tennis? What'd you see this week?
I feel like this is a perfect segue because this week I saw a heckler tried to ruin Zverev's speech. So this happened right when he accepted his finalist trophy, and right before he was about to give his speech, a woman in the crowd yelled, "Australia believes Olga and Brenda," and she was shouting it at the top of her lungs. And Zverev just kind of looked up, didn't address it at all, didn't even acknowledge it, didn't let it phase him, and just waited for her to finish. And then he started his speech. And then when he was asked about it in the press conference, because obviously some reporter is going to bring it up, he handled it very well. He basically said, "This chapter of my life was closed 9 months ago, and I'm not going to reopen it."
Yeah, my one comment on this is just like, in the eyes of the law, he is innocent because I remember when the case got settled, it was settled with the presumption of innocence. Now, I don't know about the truth of the matter. I haven't been in the I wasn't in the room. So I don't know what happened, but all I'm saying is in the eyes of the law, he is innocent. So I don't think it's necessarily right to continue to call him these things.
Yeah, I think he handled it pretty well too. I think the fact he actually brought up, he's like, "Well, this was the only woman, the only person in the crowd that felt that way because it's not like other people joined in and it was just a single person. And once she was escorted out, people cheered."
Yeah.
So you could see,
Yeah. I don't
what,
know. It's just a tough
yeah,
situation.
it's messy, but we like the messy stuff. So, what did you see this week?
I saw actually that Fonseca broke into the top 100 for the first time. And interesting thing about this is he's the youngest player since Alcaraz to be in the top 100, and he's actually the second youngest South American ever, with the only one being younger was Del Potro. So I think it's great for him for his career. It gives him a bigger stage to play on. Obviously, he's not just going to be playing in challengers anymore after a success in the Australian Open like this. He'll probably continue to play a lot of challengers, but it's like he has the option now to play in these bigger tournaments because he's a top 100 player now. So definitely, I think a positive, like a step in the right direction for him.
Yeah, that's definitely great. That you actually answered my question. So when you're in the top 100, you still play some challengers. It's not like you're only playing ATPs.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get the chance to play in more tour level events, but think of someone like Berrettini. Has played in a bunch of challengers when he like maybe he loses a couple tournaments. He wants to build his confidence back up. He'll play in a challenger. I think that's kind of what they start to become once you have more success on the tour level. Is like if you lose three tournaments in a row, you might play a challenger to be like, okay, I want to get a couple wins back and then go back into maybe a tour level tournament.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna start seeing the name Fonseca a lot now, but I think it's a perfect amount, I guess, because he did beat Rublev, but he also didn't like make a crazy run in the Australian Open to build a lot of pressure on him. So like he still has high expectations, but it's not like he's, wonder kid, everyone's dialed in on him. Like he's a big name in the draw, but he's not going to be the biggest name.
Yeah. Conversely, what is the thoughts for someone like Lerner Tien? Lerner Tien jumped into like the top 80 now.
Jeez, that's a lot of pressure. That's some big shoes to fill.
He's probably going to be consistently playing in tour level tournaments now, and the hope is that he'll at least win a couple rounds in these tournaments. But realistically, what do you expect from a guy that's number 80? Not that much.
Yeah, so young too.
100%. How about a bet of the week? What'd you go for here?
Bet of the week, we got Montpellier kicking off, and I'm taking Botic van de Zandschulp over his fellow Dutchman, Talon Griekspoor, and those odds are plus 135. This was kind of tough. I feel like they're pretty even. The head-to-head's 1-1. I know Griekspoor is ranked, a bit higher than Van de Zandschulp, but they both lost the first round of the Australian Open. So I feel like neither one of them really has the momentum going in. And I'm just going with Botic because of the odds here.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I think Van de Zandschulp got a little bit of a boost in people's perspective or opinion on him because of his win at the U.S. Open last year.
100%.
I think here it'll be a very close match. It definitely could go either way, and I think at plus 135, it's a reasonable value bet.
Yeah. What about you? Who are you taking this week?
I'm going with Gasquet plus 110 over Manarino. Not super confident in this one. I just think you look at where Manarino is, he's kind of backsliding 4-10 in his last 10 matches. And Gasquet, with his retirement upcoming, he's probably pushing all out to finish strong. So I think he could get it done here.
Yeah. So we have an all Dutch matchup and then an all French matchup,
Yeah.
pinning
And
people against each other.
100% the countryman.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. How about match of the week?
My match of the week, I think, was probably the second best match of the week. I
Yeah.
think,
Let's save the best for last here.
yeah. Mine was Zverev versus Paul. We kind of talked about this one earlier. And while it did end up going to Zverev in 4 sets, I do think it was a match where it felt like could go either way. Paul definitely had his chances, like we talked about earlier, but he just couldn't deliver in those key moments. And I think that while they didn't go his way, the fact that those moments happened did make the match more tense and more engaging to watch.
Definitely. And Tommy Paul into the top 10 now. I think he's number 8 or 9.
Yeah, I think number 9, pretty good showing for him and a step up in the right direction.
Most definitely.
And what about you? I mean, we kind of know which one you went for, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Djokovic Alcaraz quarterfinal. I think this is one of the best rivalries in tennis at the moment. I feel like these two always have great hard fought matches. And I personally think that Alcaraz is a big reason that Novak is still on tour competing at the level that he is. Because I feel like he just kind of reignited that flame, that fire in him after Raja and Rafa retired. Also, these two were 3-3 head to head until this summer at the Olympics when Novak got the best of him for the gold medal, and then beat him here, which brought the head to head to 5-3 in Novak's favor. And I'm just not sure how many more matches we're going to get from these two. So I feel like this was kind of the last match where Djokovic asserted his dominance on the younger generation and like one of the best players in the younger generation.
100%. I mean, yeah, I think it's almost underselling it to say that these guys have had a great head to head because it's been maybe not just one of the best rivalries at the moment, but maybe one of the best in terms of match performance, like matchups of all time.
Mm-hmm.
First time they play, Alcaraz, I think, beats him. And it was like, oh my God, who is this kid? Like, he was obviously already playing pretty well that year, but it was like, okay, this guy is the real deal. And then they played at the French Open in that crazy semifinal where Alcaraz pulled off some of the most insane shots I've ever seen. They had that monumental 2023 Wimbledon final. They have that Olympic final where they play and it's a super close match. So the Cincinnati final, one of the best three setters of all time, I think, like almost undoubtedly.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these have been crazy matches. And I think this was an exciting one. Didn't disappoint. Wasn't necessarily the best match they've played, but the standard for that is so high that it still was a great match.
Mm-hmm. I might even go out on a limb here and say that these two single-handedly saved tennis once the other two retired. As far as keeping interest peaked in it, like
I see what you're saying. Yeah. No, I
yeah,
mean, if you have just Sinner and Alcaraz, obviously you're not always going to get that matchup. And I think Sinner is a less exciting player to watch than Alcaraz for sure.
yeah, and then I feel like the Sinner Djokovic head to head is kind of underrated, even though they're 4-4 against each other. But I feel like the matches just aren't as exciting as the Djokovic Alcaraz ones.
Yeah, I think part of it, even if the match is like relatively close, like we have that quarterfinal a couple years ago where Djokovic came back from down 2 sets to love. It's like even then, just Sinner's style of play, it feels as though he's much more kind of methodical. And when you have Alcaraz making all these magical moments, it makes the match so much more exciting to watch. than Sinner just winning the point in kind of like a less exciting way, I guess.
Yeah, he doesn't really engage the crowd as much. He doesn't really celebrate. He just gets it done. He's a lunch pail guy. Puts on his hard hat, gets it done.
100%.
Also, Kyrgios had nothing to say after Sinner won. I specifically looked to see, like, all right, let's see what Kyrgios had to say. Nothing. Silent.
Yeah, well, because he lost in the first round.
Yeah. I thought he would say something like how bad this was for the sport.
Yeah.
For it to have a drug,
I
someone who
think
tested positive for drugs win.
I'll be honest, I think like Kyrgios had like it almost was a negative for his voice for him to come back because while he was gone, it was like, oh, this guy still was a real threat when he was playing, and we'll see what he does when he gets back. And he comes back and he loses 2 first rounds, and you're like, okay, maybe he's just not like
Yeah.
relevant anymore.
Yeah, he's got a couple months left. Yeah. All right, and that's the show. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Painting Lines Podcast. Feel free to shoot us a DM or email us any questions or thoughts at paintinglinespodcast@gmail.com.